My experience of buying the 300L was probably a lot like anyone's experience at the moment trying to buy a motorcycle. You walk into the dealership, you ask for a test ride, and all you see is tumbleweeds, dust, and a sorry, we don't have any stock available. So I understand when I get so many questions saying, Solid, how do I make a decision between the 300L and the 300 Rally when I can't get a test ride on either, particularly if you're a learner. So today I wanted to go through the differences that separate both of these bikes and what exactly it was that helped me make a decision so easily between the L and the Rally. It really was a clear decision for me in the end. So let's just jump straight in. Obviously the headlight is different on each model. I've got the Australian version which has the LED headlight set up on the 300L. It's fantastic for a dual sport headlight. It probably isn't quite as good as the Rally's headlight as that's made far more for road use, but it is fairly good. But I would expect, having ridden the 250L and the 250 Rally, the difference between those two headlights was noticeable. So if you're wanting maximum illumination and you don't want to modify the bikes afterwards, perhaps the Rally is the way to go. Next up is fairing. You can see on the 300L here that there is almost no fairing. It covers the petrol tank and the radiators, whereas the Rally has a far more comprehensive fairing setup. Now that means that it is far more comfortable to ride out on the open road. It keeps the wind and the weather off you, and you've got that nice big screen as well to remember. So that's very comfortable out on the open road, and it keeps all that wind off you. That is a bit of a detriment when it comes to the tighter riding. When you're riding hot, slow conditions and you want airflow through you to keep you cool, that is going to be frustrating, as well as when you're doing very difficult riding and you're dropping your bike a lot. There's a lot less on this to brake than there is on the Rallies. If you're a guy that likes single track and you are pushing it and you do drop it a lot and braking stuff is a concern to you, then the 300L will have less to brake, but it means you will have a slightly less comfortable ride in order to get to the trails, and you certainly won't be as comfortable out on the open road on those long adventure rides. Tank size is a big one and an obvious one. This has a 7.8 litre fuel tank, which gives you just over 200 kilometers of range. I've found about 225 to 230 thereabouts. Whereas on the Rally, you get 12.8 litres, which I've heard takes you to above 400 kilometers if you ride it very gingerly. If fuel anxiety is a big deal for you and you're doing more road stuff than you are single track and you're doing big long rides, or maybe you just like the big tank straight out the gate, you don't want to have to go to the aftermarket, then the Rally has the bigger tank, and that is an advantage. But it's also a disadvantage. Because this has a smaller tank, it means it's skinnier, you can grab the bike better with your legs, and it makes it a far better experience in the tighter, tougher riding. And with this, you can start to see how each of these bikes are designed. Clearly this is meant for more of the dirt and the more technical stuff, and the Rally does lean slightly towards the more adventure riding type stuff. There is a weight differential between both of these bikes. Now we could talk about wet weight with both bikes fully fueled, and the weight difference would be about 9 kilograms, with this being 142 kilograms wet, and obviously the Rally being heavier, so just into the 150s. But the more important weight difference is the difference between these two bikes when they're dry. When there's no fluids in both of these bikes, the 300L is still 4 kilos heavier. Now some of you might scoff at 4 kilos, that's nothing, but it can add up after a long day. If you're constantly picking up the bike, you're in tight stuff, flipping it over all the time, that can really fatigue you. On the other side, if you're out on the open road a lot and you value that extra weight that gives you extra stability, particularly in high wind scenarios, the Rally is going to feel a little more planted out on the open roads. Think about what kind of weight you want out of your bike. Do you want more stability on road, or do you want more ease of use off road? Now I did talk about the fairing and the windscreen before, but I did want to focus just on the windscreen itself, as that is a big difference in my eyes. The windscreen on the Rally, like I said, can provide you wind protection from the weather as well, so if rain's coming at you, it does keep some off. It also protects you from bugs and insects and all that kind of stuff, and most importantly is less fatiguing out on the open road because you're not trying as hard to hold on to the handlebars, which can be a great advantage. But on the flip side, side, it can also be a problem. Like I said, with the fairing, it does keep the wind off you. So that means when stuff gets tight and slow, you're not getting as much air movement through your jacket or through your jersey to keep cool. There's also just that little niggle that I have with a windscreen when I'm doing particularly single track and I'm wanting to see the terrain immediately in front of me. Having any kind of obstruction from my view can get a little frustrating. Even if it is clear, I like having nothing in between me and being able to see the trail in front of me. Now the brakes are different between the Rally and the L here. Now the rotor is smaller on the L. It's around the 256 millimeters, and on the Rally it's actually 296 millimeters. So the rotor is bigger on the Rally. That's to cope with the extra weight that the Rally has. And from a lot of reporting, people say there isn't much difference in the braking capability of both. It's very hard to tell. That could be because of the extra weight and the rotor is doing its job on the Rally, or it could be that the difference is so small and that these are such light bikes that the bigger rotor really doesn't have much of an impact. It is good to know that on the heavier bike you do have a bigger rotor, but I've got to say that the brakes are more than adequate on the L as well. And this is the only difference between the braking package on both bikes. The other difference here is the suspension. Now don't freak out thinking, how did you miss that? They actually use exactly the same suspension components. What's different is the tuning of that stock suspension. So the spring rate and the dampening is slightly different for each bike. So the L, the spring rate and dampening is actually tailored more for the off-road. It's tuned to take the bigger hits off-road better, so it's a little stiffer. Whereas the Rally is a little bit softer and a little more versatile for the more adventure riding that you might find yourself doing. Either of those setups does have a slight advantage depending on what scenario you are riding in. So let's get to the tougher part. Why the hell did I choose the L behind me and not the Rally? And the last one of these is probably going to be a bit of a shocker for a few of you, as it is a bit left field, but it is a big factor in my decision-making process that I think is often overlooked. So let's get into them now. The plastics on this bike is very minimal, and that means when I crash or drop the bike, and as you know that's very regularly, it means there's less to break and less to fix. So that saves me money and it saves me a headache, and it's just what I prefer. I absolutely love the look of this 300L in this LED Australian and Asian version. I think it looks absolutely fantastic, and it captivated me from the moment I saw it. It just looks like a small 450RL. So I loved the look of it. And I'd got a little bored with the Rally's looks, but the fact that it's been out for quite some years, I've just become more numb to its appearance, whereas this was fresh and appealing. That might not make so much sense in America, where you get the 250L headlight and indicators and all that on your 300L, but for me that was definitely a factor for me. I always gravitate towards more enduro and dual sport looking motorcycles than I do the adventure and rally kind of look. I knew the kind of terrain I was going to be riding. So that is generally 90% off-road, dirt roads, twin tracks, single track I find myself on a lot. Despite not having an enduro bike, I love to pod along with my mates on single track, which can get quite tricky. So I wanted the skinniest, thinnest, lightest dual sport I could get with enough power, and the 300L really fits that bill. Now for me, the Rally just is a bit bigger, a bit heavier, and whilst it is still the same bike at heart, it isn't quite as set up to really do that single track kind of riding. 4 kilos. While it isn't a huge weight differential, that is going to add up on a long day in the saddle where you're doing technical riding and dropping the bike multiple times in a day. I'm always going to prefer the lighter bike no matter what. Now, if you're out on the open road and you want stability, that might not be your priority. In fact, you might want the extra weight of the Rally. Now, a lot of people are going to point out, but yeah, Solid, you're going to be adding accessories and a bigger petrol tank and all that stuff. You're absolutely right, but I'm starting at a lower base weight than the Rally. That 4 kilos was a big factor in my decision-making process. So the last one is something that is very important to me and I don't think gets talked about enough and often gets swept under the rug, and that's the amount of confidence that a bike gives to you. So the difference between the Rally and the L, while minute, it does get into your head a bit if you're an average rider. Let me explain. You hop onto a 250L or a 300L and it just looks thin and skinny and unintimidating. So you hop on it and you immediately feel confident, especially off-road. Whereas the Rally, as you walk up to it with the screen, the bigger fairing, the bigger tank, it looks bigger. And it's a mental thing here. Whilst it is almost as flickable, almost as light, it's the same motor and suspension and wheels and everything. The mental part that you see that bigger bike, it's a bigger bike in front of you, it spreads your legs more because of that larger tank. I just don't feel quite as confident on the Rally as I do on the L when I'm doing the really difficult single track kind of riding. And that's where I need the bike to really shine the most, because that's my weakest point in my riding, is my technical skills in slow, difficult terrain. On the road and on twin tracks and dirt roads, I'm very confident. But when I get to single track, that's where I really need help. And that was what really helped me make the decision the easiest. But on the flip side of that, if you're the kind of person that is really worried about riding on the road, and there are those people and it is perfectly fine, having the confidence of a bigger looking bike that takes up more of a presence on the road, has better stability because it has a little more weight, perhaps that is going to give you more confidence and allow you to say, yep, I'm going to ride to the trails today because I feel confident that I will get there alive. And if the Rally does that for you, then that is the more important bike for you. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Find where your mental weakness is and try and get the bike that really complements that weakness, allows it to become a strength for you and patch over that weakness that you have as a rider. I can hear a few of you saying, Solid, I love what you're saying, but I'm still no closer to making a decision. Can you please just tell me which bike is best for which kind of scenario? Well, the Rally is better on the road. The 300L I think is better in the dirt. If you're leaning towards more of an adventure bike, but you still want dual sport capability, the Rally is going to make a lot of sense. Whereas the 300L, I think it does a better job if you want just a pure dual sport, if your focus is dirt, or you just like doing what I'm doing with my mates where we find ourselves on enduro tracks, but doing what I term soft enduro. So that is enduro riding just at a slow and pathetic pace with not much skill and falling off a lot a bit. If that's you, then the 300L is fantastic. Both of these bikes are so fundamentally similar and so fundamentally fantastic. Wholeheartedly, this is a fantastic bike for a beginner. Hopefully all that's helped you out. I'm gonna go and finish my coffee. So enjoy the trails. Don't forget to stay shiny side up, and I'll see you in the next one. Catch you later.